Hello and welcome to more history stuff. You might notice I've hacked off the beard. This lockdown is affecting us all in many and various ways, and for some reason I decided it was a good idea to shave off all the face fuzz and look like I'm about 12 years old again. But never mind, let's get to the subject. This is the latest in a series of videos I'm making about the life and career of Gruffudd ap Gwenwynwyn, Lord of Powys, Southern Powys in mid Wales in the 13th century. And in the last video I took him up to 1276, which is this very important year, marks the beginning of a war between King Edward I and Prince Llywelyn ap Gruffudd, England and Wales effectively. And war is formally declared on Prince Llywelyn by the King at Parliament in Westminster in November of this year, 1276. The King himself doesn't take the field for several months afterwards, and there's still a lot of diplomacy going on, a lot of negotiation. But while these talks are in progress, some of Edward's captains start to undertake sporadic military action in various bits of Wales. For instance, Payne Charworth, the Lord of Kidwelly, one of the great Marcher lords, he goes into West Wales to take the submission of the Lords of the West, the Princes of West Wales. This is an attempt to sort of undermine Llywelyn's position before the war really gets started. If you take the submission of princes like Rhys ap Meredydd and his cousins Rhys Wyndod, people like that, then Llywelyn's left flank in West Wales has effectively crumbled away before the conflict proper really gets started. And then you've got the likes of Gruffudd, who for months has been conducting his own sort of private war really on the Welsh marches and the borderlands, and leading repeated raids, him and his sons, into southern Powys, which, so far as Gruffudd is concerned, is in fact his territory. It's his ancestral land, which Llywelyn has stolen from him. And what he's doing by leading these raids, he's attempting to soften up Llywelyn's defences before the main sort of English offensive rolls into mid-Wales. And in late 1276, after war has been formally declared, Gruffudd finally feels confident enough to not just lead these sporadic raids into mid-Powys, but actually make a serious effort to go into the territory with a proper army and effectively reconquer Powys from the Prince of Wales. And this is what he does. In late 1276, early 1277, over the winter months going into the spring, Gruffudd marches into his lands, his former lands in southern Powys. He's got the support of the Sheriff of Shropshire, one of Edward's captains, a chap with the very unfortunate name of Bogo Noville, a proper medieval name for you, Bogo. And Bogo has probably supplied Gruffudd with English troops, so this is a half Powysian army, half English army. They're working in combination. He re-enters southern Powys and embarks upon a very swift and very successful reconquest. And this is how this particular section of the war needs to be viewed. You need to put aside any sort of concept of nationalism or modern patriotism. Gruffudd is fighting this war, as he's been fighting all of his adult life really, to reconquer and reclaim his lands, which, so far as he is concerned, have been unjustly stolen from him by the Prince of Wales, who is also the Lord of Gwynedd and Gruffudd's ancestral enemy. This isn't about England v Wales as such. Gruffudd isn't wearing an England rugby shirt. He's not an Englishman. He is a prince of a very noble, ancient royal house, and he is attempting to take back his lands. He's got English support, of course, but then the Princes of Powys have been doing this for centuries. They have always been sandwiched between Gwynedd and England, which are these two very ambitious expansionist states. And the Lords of Powys have always had to dance this sort of very, or walk, whatever metaphor you like, walk this very difficult tightrope. They've got to survive somehow, because that's what it's all about, survival and handing on your lands to your heirs and continuing the bloodline. And survival, so far as they're concerned, means doing some very pragmatic and ruthless things. And Gruffudd, he carries on this tradition. He's just doing what his ancestors have done. So he goes into southern Powys with English support, and reading from my notes as usual, this is very successful, as we know from a series of letters sent by Bogo, Paul Bogo with his strange name, to Edward I over the winter and spring months. Bogo reports to the king that the men of Welshpool, which is the location of Gruffudd's castle of Welshpool, had turned and done homage to Gruffudd, as had the men of Tair Swydd, which is another region of Powys, whereby the king could have 700 men and more. And that's quite interesting. Tair Swydd is quite a small part of southern Powys, but the fact that Bogo tells the king that it's possible to raise at least 700 fighting men from this little chunk of Powys is an example of the kind of martial culture of Wales. Every man, every able-bodied man is a warrior, from the peasant, farmers, labourers, up to the aristocrats, the princes. Everyone is a warrior. And this is why if you conquer or if you take over a part of Wales and then you start drawing upon the men of that area, you will soon have a very large pool of fighting men to draw from. And this is what Edward does when he finally imposes his authority over the whole of Wales. He suddenly finds himself with this massive recruitment pool to draw upon for his wars in Flanders, Gascony, Scotland and elsewhere. So back to 1276, 1277, Gruffudd goes into southern Powys. What's interesting is that the men of Powys, who have been ruled by Prince Llywelyn for the past few years, they don't make any effort at resistance. They don't make the slightest attempt to resist Gruffudd. Instead, they welcome him because he is their ancestral lord. They regard him as their natural lord because his family have been rulers of Powys for generations, centuries. And the majority of them regard Prince Llywelyn as an invader, as a conqueror. And they cast off any pretense at loyalty to the Prince of Wales, to Gwynedd, and they flock to Gruffudd. There probably isn't much fighting, or any really. The whole of the region, all of the men in the region, they just abandon Llywelyn, drive out any of his men who happen to be there, and flock to Gruffudd. And this is shown by the names of some of the recorded names of some of the Powysian elite, the rulers and the aristocracy of Powys, who hurry to rejoin Gruffudd in the spring of 1277. Some of the names that survive are people like Gruffudd ap Gwen, who became another Gruffudd, who became Gruffudd's seneschal. His uncles Iorwerth and Tudur, who were sons of a man named Gronwy, and then further up the valley of the Severn, in a part of Powys or Mid Wales called Arwystli, the three most powerful men of that land agreed to come to the peace of the king as long as their privileges were maintained. So these three powerful Welsh nobles have agreed to submit to the king so long as he agrees to maintain their ancient customs and traditions. And these men were descendants of the old dynasty of Traherne ap Caradog, who was one of the ancient kings of Wales. So what's happened here is that Prince Llywelyn's presence in southern Powys has crumbled away very quickly in a matter of weeks. Probably not much fighting, as I said. All of the important landholders and nobles of the district, as well as the communities, all the men really have rallied to Gruffudd, whom they regard as their natural lord. And Llywelyn has been driven out. And his position crumbles away. And Gruffudd has finally achieved this victory, this comeback that he's been planning for years, decades probably. In the past, he's managed to reclaim temporarily his lands in southern Powys, only to lose them again after a few months, or at best a couple of years, because he cannot maintain his position against the more powerful princes of Gwynedd. But finally, in 1276, into 1277, he's got the full support of the English crown, of King Edward, who brings these enormous resources into play. I mean, Edward can draw upon not only the military strength of England, but Ireland, Gascony. He's got other lands, Ponthieu in northern France, Ponthieu and Montreal. He can bring an enormous amount of money into play. He's got a very smooth flow of credit at this stage from various Italian banking houses who advance him enormous loans to prosecute his wars in Wales. And so Griffith has got all this behind him, and he's now got the strength and the confidence and the ability to challenge Llywelyn's authority in Powys and very quickly drive him out. And as far as Griffith and his sons are concerned, this war is a huge success. It is the victory that they've been planning and dreaming of for a long time now. And it ends in the utter sort of defeat and humiliation of Prince Llywelyn, because when Llywelyn eventually surrenders to Edward's forces in November 1277, he has to submit and agree to a treaty, the Treaty of Aberconwy, which effectively wipes out all of Llywelyn's political and military gains that he's made in the past 20 or 30 years. Edward takes pretty much everything. He reverses everything that Llywelyn has achieved. He doesn't destroy him as such. He leaves him with his title, and he lets him keep his like a little bit of power. He's confined into the mountains of Snowdonia, his heartlands west of the River Conwy. But otherwise, he has no real power in any other part of Wales. And Gruffudd emerges triumphant. And this is the sort of point, one of the points I'm making is that this is not a straightforward conflict between England and Wales, English v Welsh. And so long as we continue to interpret these medieval dynastic wars as ethnic conflicts, as you know, you've got the Cymry on one side, the Welsh, and then the English, the Saxons on the other, and it's almost like a precursor to a Six Nations rugby match, with one side wearing white shirts, the other side wearing red. Well, where does somebody like Gruffudd ap Gwenwynwyn fit into that? Is he somewhere in the middle wearing a pink shirt? No, of course not. It doesn't work. Gruffudd, like pretty much everyone else in this era, is fixated on his ancestry, his dynastic concerns, the lands and territories that he considers to be his because his family have held them. And they happen to be in Wales, and he is a Welsh man. He is perfectly aware that he has a shared culture, in a sense, and a shared language with someone like Prince Llywelyn. But they're not allies, they're not friends, they hate each other's guts. And this pattern is repeated all over Western Europe. It is all family, it is all bloodline, ancestry, dynasty. It's not nationalism, it's not nation v nation. Gruffudd would have been baffled by this concept that he was some kind of traitor to Prince Llywelyn, who, I mean, the House of Gwynedd, if you were to ask Gruffudd, if you look back over the history of these dynastic wars, Gwynedd had pretty much always been the aggressor against Powys. It had repeatedly invaded southern Powys, killed a great many Powysian Welsh people, thrown down castles, seized every opportunity to beat the Lords of Powys down in war. They broke every treaty, they did terrible things, really. And Gruffudd is fighting back. Gruffudd is saying, no, I'm going to do whatever it takes to end this threat to my dynasty and reclaim my lands. And in 1276, what he does is seize an opportunity. And that is what these men, these medieval lords and princes are all about. It's all about seizing opportunities, taking advantage, and making it count. And so, in this year, in these 2 years rather, 1276 to 77, this is what Gruffudd does. He is extremely successful. He reconquers his lands, and At this point, he is really at the top of the wheel of fortune, if you like. He's been at the bottom, and it's been a very slow climb back up, but now he's at the summit. He's finally done what he set out to do all those years ago. So let's leave him there, feeling pretty good about himself. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video and the view of my bed over there. I forgot to close the door, and I'll hopefully speak to you again later.